Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in with A Few Minutes for Millennials. Today, we are sitting down with Aftyn from Indivisible, Tennessee. Hello, Aftyn. Welcome to our show, and we really appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about Indivisible, Tennessee?
Yes. So, Indivisible Tennessee is the network of indivisible groups across the state who started in 2016 resisting Trump's agenda, but then quickly moved to building local power and engaging in electoral and advocacy campaigns. The National Indivisible organization started right after Trump. The people who began the organization wrote a Google Doc outlining the tactics that they had learned while working in Congress to manage the Tea Party, the rise of the Tea Party in state. And so they wrote this Google Doc, and within a few weeks it had millions of downloads. And then all of these groups starting popping up in every congressional district across the country. So in Tennessee, I provide resources to them as well as create their campaign plans and help them as they continue to build power from the local to the federal level.
Wow, that's amazing. Way to get in there and just, try to make a difference. That's amazing that you're an advocate to these people and these groups. Now, we're millennials and our language is emoji. I see your setup and yours. How are you liking it?
I love it. I hope since we have entered a new period of coronavirus and online videos, I would love to use this as my Zoom profile sometime, but it's very cool. It's very tech savvy.
Now, let's get into it. From your perspective, give us your opinion on the three most critical issues millennials are facing.
So I would say the first issue is the amount of student debt that the average American student accumulates. I've had the opportunity to work in other countries and to learn from other students, other university students across the globe, how they pay for college. And I will tell you right now that the United States is the only developed country that leaves their students with the amount of debt that they do. Now, the reason for this is higher education. The states used to subsidize higher ed at larger rates. But unfortunately, with the rising cost of living, the rising cost of education, and wages have been stagnant for quite some time. The second issue, I would say, I'm very interested in this issue of that millennials will be the poorest generation. Our parents the boomers were the wealthiest, and they were able to accumulate a lot of wealth in their lifetime. Unfortunately, because of student debt, low wages, that we as millennials are not amassing as much wealth. We're sinking deeper into debt. And it's just, we will not see the type of wealth that our parents have in the form of buying houses, buying cars, buying property, putting money away for retirement, as well as investing in the stock market. I thought it was interesting to watch, right now in the midst of COVID, we have the highest rates of unemployment in American history. And you can really tell the folks and families that have the generational wealth because they will be talking about their stock market or their stock portfolio. It's just funny because as millennials, we just don't have that. So those aren't issues for us. So in the next few decades, dependent upon politics or what happens, that we will just not see the amount of wealth that our parents did. And trying to explain that to boomers, I think, has been a difficulty for me, especially my parents. But fortunately, they get it. And then the third issue, I would say, unfortunately, our political process in the form of electoralism doesn't benefit millennials. If you look around you and you see the people that are making decisions, for example, in our state of Tennessee, most of those people are white, most of those people are men, and most of those people are wealthy. I call them the pale, stale, and male crowd. And this archetype has created and benefited from our political process for generations. And as millennials, we are not a voting bloc right now. And so at the federal level, you saw the argument from the Bernie Sanders campaign that they were going to mobilize all these young voters. Well, as it turned out that it's much more difficult to register and mobilize a millennial voter than they had anticipated. I have a few ideas about why this is true, but the main one is because electoralism, the process of voting, has only benefited a select few. And so until millennials feel that the electoral process benefits them, they see people that look like them, they see their policy agendas being pushed forward, they will continue not to participate. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if we don't participate, then we don't amass the votes needed to become a voting bloc and create and determine how the agenda is set and build power. I would say that those are the three, there's so many, but those are my top three issues affecting millennials today.
Great, and I definitely agree with each and every one of the issues you shared. You said that the first critical issue was student debt, the second one was generational wealth, and lastly, the process, the electoral process. So I definitely agree with those. If you are open to sharing, is there a candidate or candidates you think will best address the issues you just shared with us?
Yeah, at the federal level, exit polling shows that former presidential candidate Bernie Sanders had the highest rate of young voters of any candidate to run. And if you look at his platform, those three issues that I just talked about were directly in alignment with his campaign and what he was promising to do as our president. He wanted to eradicate student debt. He wanted to ensure that millennials and working folks had a chance at a livelihood, at a middle-class life that seems to not exist anymore. And he wanted millennials to be part of the political process. So I would say that, and polling corroborates what I'm saying, that Bernie Sanders was the favorite of young folks, even being an old Jewish guy. And so I think moving forward, I'm interested to see how Biden leans into what millennials are saying and really tries to capitalize on the movement and the support that Bernie Sanders cultivated during his campaign. I would say at the state level, as we know, all politics are local. I would look to Representative Gloria Johnson from Knoxville, who is a progressive in the state legislature. She is a champion for the student movement at UT Knoxville and ensuring that, for example, students can vote and that they don't have to have an ID, which ends up being a tactic of voter suppression in Tennessee. So it's a state representative that has your agenda and is fighting for you, and she is up for re-election this fall. And then at the congressional level in Tennessee, a race that I'm very excited to watch is the congressional 4th Democratic primary, but from a race between a Biden delegate and a Bernie victory captain. And so both of these people are millennials, and I look forward to seeing the dialogue between them and the differences between their campaigns and how they can lean into the millennial agenda and move it forward. So those are some candidates I'm excited to watch and listen to the next couple of months.
Do you have any comments on the current pandemic we're facing as far as like social distancing, the stay-at-home order, COVID-19 policies, or any personal experiences you want to share with us?
Sure. I would say the first challenge I have for millennials during this time is to ensure that people around you are connected digitally, using your digital literacy that you have and the skill sets you've developed by just being a millennial and being raised on the internet. I am a statewide organizer, and so I see a lot of I organize with a lot of older folks who may not have the digital literacy skills that we have. And I would challenge millennials to connect and check in on people around them and to help them, to orient them around these tech tools that we use. So for example, Google Hangouts or Zoom. I've hosted a few Zoom tutorials with groups across Tennessee, especially in rural parts of the state, showing them how to host their Zoom meetings as social distancing continues. So I would challenge millennials to support the people around them, and also note that many homes in Tennessee do not have robust access to the internet. And so in a time of social distancing, I would also challenge millennials to be calling out that the internet should be a public utility, that people should not have to pay for internet because it's considered a utility in this day and time, especially during the era of COVID. I have been personally affected. I had a co-worker suddenly pass away 2 weeks ago. And so it made the pandemic very close, much closer than I had anticipated. So I think I would like to look back at this time and think of my community as well as organizations that are engaging in direct and mutual aid, and maybe look back at this time to note that we were all in it together, and we were trying to ensure that more of us were connected, and that we were fighting to ensure access to the basic necessities that I believe is the internet. And then lastly, this is not going to end anytime soon. Experts are showing that this is just the first wave, and we can expect 2 to 3 waves, maybe lasting upwards until a year. And depending upon who you're following, we have a Republican administration in Tennessee that is doing the bare minimum to keep its constituency safe. And if you look at, for example, Kentucky, where they just elected a Democratic candidate, Governor Andy Beshear, he's doing the maximum to protect his citizens. And so even though we're going to be in this for a long time, I would just stress that please do all you can, because even if if quarantine has been a time of baking and house projects that for families trying to put food on the table, for the low wage workers that work 2 to 3 jobs to keep their kids fed, that this is not a time to be we need to be supportive of one another and trying to push forward progressive policies during this time.
Yes, definitely. I definitely agree with everything you just said. This does hit home for a lot of people, and if it even hasn't hit home to some, not trying to wish anything forward on anyone, but it's possible. I don't want people to think that because it hasn't happened to me or I haven't had experience myself that it can't happen. It can, and it's just best that we try to stay safe and push others to continue to stay safe.
That's right.
Do you think our last administration on the state level handled this any differently than our current?
I think, unfortunately, and this is, I could go on and on, but politics have changed dramatically since 2010, since the rise of the Tea Party. So Governor Haslam, who was the Republican governor before Governor Lee, had the time and the energy and could have flexed his muscles in a way to pass Medicaid expansion. He had a majority, he had a Republican legislature, and that could have benefited our rural hospitals. It could have increased health care access to Tennesseans that did not make enough money to either pay for their health insurance or make too much for Medicaid and too little to pay for their own. So what we're seeing now with Governor Lee as a Republican who just said that his archetype of Republican wants to shrink government down to the size where they can it can sink down the bathtub, or I forget what the phrase is, but all that to say is they believe in the role of limited government. But as we've seen in a pandemic, the role of government expands to ensure public safety of its citizens. And Lee is still resistant to expanding Medicaid, even though we are in a crisis, and even though many Tennesseans would benefit from it. So, even a policy agenda like Medicaid expansion doesn't directly benefit millennials. Okay. We oftentimes, we're on our parents' health insurance till 26. But once again, in the time of COVID, I'm asking millennials to really lean into the to understand and recognize the interconnectedness between all of our systems and all of us. And expanding Medicaid is one of those things that, would benefit our society in a really, really positive way. So, as we move forward, I challenge millennials to do the research and to listen to experts, because I do see Governor Lee in Tennessee removing barriers to easing social distancing rules, and then we could see us come back in pretty epic proportions to the point where our systems are overwhelmed. So please, please, please continue to listen to the experts and do your part to keep everyone safe.
We love connecting our interviewees to our audience. We showed you a few videos of Wolf Blitzer, Hillary Clinton, and Michelle Obama busting moves. We want to know, what are your 3 top songs or artists that make you get loose on the dance floor?
Oh, well, I love dancing. So, you can catch me, once the clubs open up in Nashville, I will be out dancing again. I would say the first artist is Lauryn Hill. I just grew up on her album, Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. I think she was a prophet. And I really value her as a musician, and her project with the Fugees as well. The Dixie Chicks, as a millennial who grew up in East Tennessee during the heyday of the Dixie Chicks, I appreciate them as musicians, as well as the really hard, difficult political stances they took during the Iraq War, and how they were vindicated years later. So, and then the third, I really enjoy bluegrass, the banjo and the mandolin. It must be because I'm from East Tennessee, but any contemporary bluegrass musician or band, I will be up front just dancing my heart out.
Now, if you are at a party and you see someone going crazy on the dance floor, and listening to one of those artists, it's probably Aftyn. To provide your top 3 issues millennials are facing, go to our website at A Few Minutes for Millennials, afmfm.org, or tweet them to us using #CriticalIssues. I'm Titilani, and thank you for joining us at A Few Minutes for Millennials. Stay safe and stay home, you guys.
Thanks so much.